She walked into the interview wearing worn-out shoes and a borrowed dress by the time she walked out. The CEO's entire world had changed. Emma never thought her small-town life would prepare her for something big. She was just a farmer's daughter, living in a place where people cared more about weather than websites, more about cows than computers. Her father, Mr. Howard, had raised her alone since she was 7 after her mother passed away. Their farm wasn't fancy. It was old, the paint peeling off the barn, fences half broken, and tractors that coughed and sputtered like they were about to die every morning. But it was theirs, and they worked hard to keep it running. Emma was different from most kids in the area. While other girls talked about marrying rich or moving away, Emma wanted to learn. She loved numbers, loved how things worked. Even when the lights went out because they couldn't pay the electricity bill, she would study by lantern, surrounded by the smell of hay and old wood. She didn't have fancy gadgets or tutors, just an old laptop her dad fixed from scrap and a strong will to succeed. Every day after school, she'd help her father feed the animals, clean the barn, check the fences, and drive the tractor during planting season. And then at night, when others watched TV or went out, Emma read books on business, supply chains, economics, and technology. She watched videos of CEOs talking about success. She read news about industries. She dreamed of working in a company where she could make big decisions not to show off, but to give her father a better life. He had given up everything for her. Now she wanted to do something big for him. People in town thought she was just a dreamer. They didn't say it out loud, but you could tell by their eyes, the way they smiled politely when she spoke about going to the city. They knew Emma was smart, but in their minds, a girl from a farm couldn't possibly compete with people from big cities, with polished degrees and smooth words. Emma heard them whisper once at the grocery store, "She's sweet, but no way she's getting that job. These companies don't even look at girls like her." But Emma didn't care. She had found a job posting online from a top tech firm in the city, one of the biggest and most successful. The company was called Stratix, and it was led by Blake Rutherford, a CEO known for being brilliant but arrogant. He was always in the news, either for making a billion-dollar deal or for firing someone on the spot. Emma read everything about him. She noticed something interesting. His company hired only people who had the same backgrounds: rich colleges, big cities, high society. Nobody from simple roots. That made her want it even more. She didn't have a fancy resume, but she had results. She had helped her father recover from 2 failed seasons by restructuring how they rotated crops. She tracked market prices and sold their produce directly to local stores to avoid middlemen. She helped other farmers pool their resources to buy equipment. She even taught herself how to use business tools like Excel, PowerPoint, and accounting software. She wrote all this in her cover letter and applied, not expecting much. Weeks passed, and Emma kept working on the farm. Then one day an email popped up. "Congratulations. You've been shortlisted for an in-person interview at Stratix headquarters." Her heart skipped a beat. She read it 3 times. She couldn't believe it. She screamed so loud that even the chickens ran. Her father rushed in, worried. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I got it, Dad," she said, holding up the email. "They want to meet me." He was speechless for a moment, then gave her the biggest hug. "I knew you could do it," he whispered. "I just didn't know they'd see it too." But excitement quickly turned into worry. She didn't have the money for a flight, didn't own a suit, and didn't know how interviews in big companies worked. Her dad went into the shed and came out with an old wooden box. Inside were some savings money he had put aside for emergencies. "This is for you," he said. "You're the best investment I'll ever make." Emma used the money to buy a bus ticket. It would be a long ride, 12 hours to the city. She packed a small bag, a simple dress her aunt had given her years ago, a copy of her resume, and the notebook where she had written ideas about Stratix. As the bus moved through the dark countryside, Emma stared out the window, nervous and excited. When she reached the city, everything felt different. The buildings were huge, the roads crowded, and people walked fast, with phones glued to their ears. She had never seen such tall glass towers. Stratix headquarters stood like a palace of power. Silver, modern, with a giant logo on top that seemed to shine even under clouds. Emma stepped inside and instantly felt out of place. Everyone wore suits, high heels, designer watches. She clutched her worn leather bag tightly. The receptionist looked her up and down, then asked coldly, "Name?" "Emma Howard," she said, trying to smile. "You're early. Take a seat." Emma sat in the waiting area, feeling like all eyes were on her. Two other candidates, dressed in sharp suits and expensive shoes, whispered to each other while glancing at her. She didn't need to hear what they were saying. She could guess. She won't last 5 minutes. She took a deep breath. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Your worth isn't in your clothes, Emma. It's in your courage." A woman called out her name, and Emma stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she walked firmly. She was led to a conference room with a long table where 3 people sat. One of them stood out instantly, Blake Rutherford himself. His presence filled the room, tall, sharp suit, sharp eyes. He didn't smile. "Miss Howard," he said, flipping through her file. "You came a long way." "Yes, sir." "From a farm, I see. Not a very usual background for Stratix." "Why are you here?" Emma looked at him and replied calmly, "Because unusual people often bring unusual solutions." He raised his eyebrows. "Interesting start." And just like that, the battle began. Blake asked questions, sharp and fast. "What's your biggest failure? How would you manage a failing department? What's your understanding of capital asset pricing?" Emma didn't panic. She gave honest answers. When he asked about failure, she told him about the year a storm destroyed their crops and how she reorganized their budget to survive. When he asked about managing a team, she told him how she trained young farmhands who had never even used a tractor. When he threw in business jargon, she explained how she learned those concepts by applying them on the farm. At one point, Blake smirked and said, "You think your farm experience prepares you for this world?" Emma smiled politely and replied, "Yes, because I've had to think fast, work hard, and solve real problems. Your world runs on theories, mine runs on results." That line made one of the interviewers glance up with interest. Still, Emma could feel that Blake wasn't convinced. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "So, tell me," he said, "why should I choose you over someone with an Ivy League degree?" Emma paused. Then she said something that no one expected. "Because I don't come with fancy credentials, but I come with grit. Because I've had to earn every chance, not buy it. Because your company says it values innovation, but innovation doesn't only come from boardrooms. Sometimes it comes from barns." The room went quiet. Blake didn't say anything for a long time. He looked at her, not with mockery, but with a kind of curiosity he hadn't shown before. "Thank you, Miss Howard," he said finally. "We'll be in touch." Emma nodded, stood up, and walked out. As she stepped outside the building, the wind blew softly. The city was loud, but Emma felt peaceful. No matter what happened next, she knew one thing. Clearly, she didn't just survive the interview. She owned it, and something told her this was only the beginning. Emma walked out of the first interview room with her heart racing. She had just faced the most difficult interview of her life. And the most powerful person in the room, CEO Blake Rutherford, had tried to break her confidence. Still, she walked, with her head high. She didn't know if she would get the job or not, but she knew she had stood her ground. Her answers were real, and her experiences were not from books, but from life itself. It had to count for something, but this was just the beginning. As she stepped outside the main interview hall, a young assistant named Priya came up to her and said, "Mr. Rutherford has requested you stay back for a second round. It'll be held after lunch. You'll be meeting another team." Emma blinked. "Wait, he wants me to stay?" "Yes," Priya replied with a small smile. "I think you made an impression." Emma's stomach turned. She wasn't prepared for more. She hadn't even packed lunch, and she barely had any money left. She found a bench outside and sat down, pulling out a small apple from her bag, the only snack she had brought. While eating it slowly, she looked up at the tall building and whispered to herself, "You can do this. You've come too far to stop now." 2 hours later, she was called in again. This time, the room was smaller, with only two people, a woman in a navy blue suit with a kind face and a man with glasses who looked very serious. They introduced themselves as department heads from logistics and strategy. Emma shook their hands and sat down. The woman started, "Emma, Blake asked us to dive deeper with you. He wanted to see how you think under pressure," the man added. "Let's see how well a farmer's daughter handles corporate fire." Emma smiled slightly. "I've survived wild animals, broken machines, storms, and bad crop seasons. I think I'm ready," the woman chuckled. Then the man began. "Let's say you're leading a supply chain team, and a key supplier suddenly shuts down. What do you do in the first 30 minutes? Emma didn't hesitate. "First, I find out why the supplier shut down. Was it financial? Weather-related? Legal? Yeah. That tells me whether it's a short-term or long-term issue. Next, I notify internal teams so they can adjust timelines. I immediately start looking at backup vendors even, if they're more expensive, because losing time costs more. Then I update leadership with clear facts and possible solutions." The man raised his eyebrows. That was the kind of answer he expected from someone with years of experience, not a 22-year-old from a farm. Then the woman asked, "How would you handle a team of people who don't respect you?" Emma said softly but clearly, "I've faced that. I once had to lead older farmhands during a planting season. They didn't take me seriously. But instead of acting like a boss, I worked beside them. I showed I could carry the same weight, sweat the same sweat. Slowly they began listening. I earned their respect." The interview went on for nearly an hour. They asked her everything from digital tools to communication challenges to what kind of boss she wanted to be. Emma answered with stories, examples, and lessons from her life. She didn't pretend to know everything. If she didn't know something, she admitted it, but added how she'd learn it fast. Suddenly, the door opened. Blake Rutherford walked in. He didn't sit down. He stood near the whiteboard in the room and said, "Let's do something different." He looked at Emma. "You've answered a lot of questions. I want to see how fast you can think." Picked up a marker and drew 3 circles on the board, labeling them: cost, time, quality. Let's say you're launching a new product, but suddenly the budget is cut by 30%. You still have the same deadline. What do you compromise? Cost, time, or quality? Emma paused, thinking quickly. "I'd reduce features, not quality. Focus on delivering a smaller version of the product on time and within budget. That way, we protect the company's name while staying realistic. Customers forgive limited features. They don't forgive poor quality." Blake nodded. "And if the sales team disagrees, I'd invite them to a short joint meeting. Explain the logic with data. Show them it's better to underpromise and overdeliver than the opposite." Blake smiled slightly. It wasn't a full smile, but it was. The first time he didn't look dismissive. Then he asked, "Let's say 2 of your teammates are in conflict. One is brilliant but rude. The other is kind but average. You'd only keep one. Who goes?" Emma looked up and replied calmly, "The rude one goes. A team is not just about brilliance. It's about building together. 1 toxic person can destroy 5 good ones. I'd rather train a kind person than babysit a genius with no manners." Blake tilted his head, intrigued. Interesting answer. He began to walk toward the door, but just as he reached it, he turned and said, "One last thing." He stared at her closely. "Why are you really here, Emma? What's your real reason?" Emma sat still for a moment. Then she said something that made the entire room fall silent. "My mother used to work for Stratix years ago. She was an intern here when this company was smaller. She loved this place. She believed in it. But she was treated unfairly. I found her journals after she passed away. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to finish what she started, to make this place better, more human." The man with glasses adjusted his tie. The woman looked surprised. Blake's face became unreadable. He gave her one long look, then left the room without a word. After he left, the other 2 panelists looked at each other. Then the woman said softly, "You didn't just walk into an interview, Emma. You walked into a storm. And you stayed standing. Emma walked out of the room once again, her heart thudding hard. She didn't know if she had said too much. Maybe she should have left her mother's story out of it. She had promised herself from the beginning she would be honest, no matter the result. Hours passed and no one called her. She stayed in the lobby, her legs tired, her heart unsure. The other candidates had already left. Few of them were clearly disappointed. One even muttered, "This company's a circus. Waste of time." At 6:30 p.m., the receptionist finally looked up. Emma Howard. "Yes, Mr. Rutherford wants to see you. Alone." Emma stood up slowly. Her palms were sweating. She was led to the top floor Blake's office. It was huge, filled with books, awards, and large glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. He stood there, his back to her, holding a cup of coffee. He didn't turn around. "I misjudged you," he said. Emma stayed quiet. "I thought you'd be nervous. I thought you'd crack. I even thought you'd walk out angry. But you didn't. You did something very few people have done you. Surprised me." He turned around slowly and faced her. "I don't say this often, but I was wrong." Emma looked at him, still unsure what this meant. "I want to offer you a position. Not as an intern, not even as a junior. I want you in strategic development. You'll work directly with my team. You'll start next month." Emma blinked. "Is this real?" He smiled a little. "I don't waste time with fake offers." Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. He walked to his desk, picked up a file, and handed it to her. "Read it. Think about it. But I hope you accept. You're exactly the kind of person we need." She nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you, sir." "No," he replied. "Thank you for reminding me what real leadership looks like." That night, Emma sat in a cheap hotel room with the lights of the city glowing outside her window. Called her father and told him everything. He didn't say anything at first. Then, in a trembling voice, he said, "Your mother would be so proud." Emma smiled through her tears. She had come to the city with a simple dress, an old bag, and a heart full of purpose. And now she had opened a door not just for herself, but maybe one day for others like her. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Emma couldn't sleep that night. Even though the hotel bed was soft and her body was tired after the long day, her mind kept replaying everything. The interview, Blake's stare, the moment he said, "You surprised me?" All felt like a dream. She had walked into the most difficult room of her life and had walked out with a job offer. Not just any job, but one that would change her life. But something deep inside her whispered, this wasn't the end. In fact, the real test was still coming. The next morning, she got a message from Priya, the assistant who had guided her the day before. It said, "Mr. Rutherford would like you to return to the office today at 10 a.m. He wants to introduce you to the senior operations team." Dress business casual. Emma was confused. She hadn't accepted the job yet. But she quickly dressed in the same outfit she wore the day before. It was all she had. She tied her hair neatly, wiped her shoes clean, and headed to Stratix headquarters once again. When she entered the building, everyone seemed different. The receptionist gave her a smile this time. Even the security guard nodded respectfully. Maybe the word had spread. Maybe people knew that the girl from the farm had done something unusual. Emma was taken to a large conference room with glass walls and sleek chairs. Around the table sat 10 people, men and women in expensive suits. All were older. All looked like they belonged in magazines or business documentaries. These were not mid-level managers. These were directors, VPs, and department heads. Blake stood at the head of the table. When Emma entered, he looked at her and said, "Glad you made it." She nodded politely and took the empty seat he had saved for her. "This," he said to the others, "is Emma Howard. She's not officially on our team yet, but I wanted her to listen in on today's session." Some of the directors glanced at each other. One man, Mr. Cornell, leaned forward and said with a half smile, "You mean the Emma? The one you mentioned yesterday?" Blake nodded. "Yes, the same one who reminded us that leadership doesn't come from resumes. Emma sat quietly, unsure whether this was a compliment or a challenge. The meeting began. They were discussing a serious problem. A new product that Stratex was planning to launch was delayed because one of their overseas suppliers had shut down. This delay could cost them millions and damage their reputation. Everyone in the room gave their own ideas. Some wanted to delay the launch. Some wanted to pay double to get emergency parts. Others wanted to shift the entire strategy. After an hour of arguing and debates, Blake turned to Emma and said, "What do you think?" Emma froze. She wasn't a part of the team yet. She wasn't even wearing the right clothes. But Blake had just invited her to speak in front of the most powerful people in the company. She took a deep breath. "I think," she began slowly, "everyone's treating this like a company-level crisis. But you need to treat it like a field-level challenge." They looked at her, confused. Emma continued, "On a farm, if your main crop fails, you don't waste time debating for days. You look at what's left, what's growing, what resources you do have, and then you shift." Mr. Cornell leaned back. "And what exactly would you shift, Miss Howard?" She didn't blink. Instead of focusing only on replacing the supplier, break the product into parts. Identify which components are still on schedule. Can you launch a light version of the product? One that's simpler, but still functional? It keeps your promise to the public, buys time, and avoids a total delay. Another woman, Ms. Tran, said, "But that would mean changing the marketing campaign. Redesigning ads, websites, instructions, ... Emma nodded. "Yes, but it's better than an apology letter and angry customers. And it shows flexibility. People like that." The room was quiet. For a full minute, no one spoke. Then Blake said, "She's right." Some of the directors looked surprised. Blake was never quick to agree, but today he did. "Make a note," he said to his assistant. "Let's create a new plan. Version A and version B, launch the light version in 2 weeks, full version later. Marketing will adjust messaging." Emma's idea, give her credit. Emma felt like the air had been knocked out of her chest. She had just given advice in a room full of decision makers. And they had listened. After the meeting, Blake asked her to stay behind. The room emptied slowly and Emma was left alone with him. He walked to the window and looked out. "You know," he said, "I built this company because I hated being underestimated. When I was younger, no one believed I could succeed. I swore I'd prove them wrong." Emma nodded, listening quietly. "But somewhere along the way, I became the kind of person who underestimates others." He turned to face her. "I looked at you and saw a farm girl. Nothing more. But yesterday you reminded me of who I used to be. Hungry, determined, focused. That's why I pushed you so hard. I wanted to see if you were real." Emma's voice was soft. "And did I pass?" Didn't smile, but his eyes showed respect. He didn't just pass. He raised the bar. Then his face grew serious. "But I need to ask you something, Emma. Something important." She nodded. "Yesterday you mentioned your mother, that she worked here years ago, that she left because of something bad. What did you mean?" Hesitated. She had thought long and hard about this. She didn't want revenge. But she couldn't lie either. She was an intern here years before you became CEO. She loved this place. But she noticed financial irregularities in the accounting department. She tried to report it to her manager. He laughed at her. Later, she was let go quietly. No explanation. No exit interview. She was heartbroken. She believed in this company. Expression changed. His jaw tightened. "Do you have proof?" Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She kept a diary. "I didn't bring it to accuse anyone. I brought it to understand, to learn from it." Blake took the notebook carefully. He flipped through a few pages, reading the elegant handwriting. Then he closed it and said, "Thank you for showing me this." He walked over to his desk, placed the notebook gently in a drawer and said, "I'll investigate it myself. Quietly, carefully, and if there's truth to, if there will be consequences." Emma believed him as she stood to leave. Blake said one last thing. "You've earned more than a seat here, Emma. You've earned a voice." That day changed everything. Emma wasn't just the new hire. She became the girl who challenged the Top. People across the company began whispering about the farmer's daughter who had stood her ground, who had made the CEO rethink his ways. Some people loved her for it, others were jealous. Some tried to test her with sarcasm or complex questions. But Emma never showed fear. She didn't try to pretend to be smarter. She just stayed honest, curious, and strong. One day in the lunch area, senior manager tried to embarrass her in front of a group. "So Emma, when are you going to teach us how to milk cows?" People laughed. Emma looked at him calmly and said, "Only after you teach me how to manage a project without wasting money, time, or people's energy." The laughter changed direction. Emma smiled, not to be mean, but because she knew something now she belonged. Not because of her background, but because of her thinking, her courage, her truth. What started as an interview had turned into a revolution, and the farmer's daughter was just getting started. Emma had slowly become a name people at Stratix whispered with a mix of curiosity, respect, and confusion. She wasn't like the others. She didn't wear the latest fashion or speak in business buzzwords. She didn't try to impress anyone with fake confidence. But still, when she spoke, people listened. When problems came up, some team members began quietly turning to her even before their own managers. She didn't act like she was better. She acted like she cared. But not everyone liked that. There were people in the company who had spent years climbing up, following the rules, impressing the right people, playing politics. And now this young woman from a dusty farm had gotten close to the CEO. That didn't sit well with them, especially not with Marcus Gray Senior Vice, President of Finance. He had been in the company since its early days. He believed in systems, in structure, and keeping outsiders out. He also happened to be the same man Emma's mother had written about in her diary. Emma didn't know that yet. One morning, she was walking into work when Priya met her near the elevator. With a nervous look, "Emma, Mr. Rutherford wants to see you." "Right away, is something wrong?" Emma asked. "I don't know. He just said it was urgent." Emma took the elevator to the top floor, heart pounding. Had she made a mistake? Had someone complained about her? When she entered Blake's office, he was sitting alone at his desk. He didn't look up right away. There was a different air in the room, heavier, colder. "Close the door, Emma." He said quietly she did. Blake finally looked at her and said, "I looked into your mother's story." Emma stood still. He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. She wasn't lying. Everything she wrote checks out. Emma's heart thudded. Then someone silenced her. Blake interrupted, his voice sharp. "And that someone still works here." Emma's mouth went dry. "Who?" He didn't answer right away. Then he leaned back and said, "Marcus Gray." Emma froze. He's still the VP." "Yes, and worse. He's part of the board. Now, protected, powerful." She felt sick. Blake leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "I can't just fire him without evidence strong enough to hold in court. He'll explode. He has friends, lawyers. But if we collect enough, we can take him down the right way." Emma was quiet, angry, confused. Blake added, "I'm going to need your help, my help. You know how he thinks of you. He doesn't respect you. That's your strength. You're invisible to him. He won't see you coming." Emma didn't answer for a moment. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I didn't come here for revenge," she whispered. "I know," Blake replied. "That's why you're the right person for this." That evening, Emma sat in her tiny apartment, staring at her mother's diary. The soft brown cover was worn at the corners. Inside were stories about long nights working at Stratix, about her dreams, about the day she'd found something wrong in the reports and tried to speak up. She had been so proud, and then so broken. Emma felt tears slide down her cheek. She opened her laptop, and she got to work. Over the next few weeks, Emma continued her job as usual. Meetings, reports, presentations. But behind the scenes, she watched Marcus carefully, noticed how he avoided direct questions, how he pushed financial decisions. Without clear data, he spoke in long, clever sentences that sounded smart, but meant very little. She began collecting small things, emails, printouts, notes from meetings. Slowly, a pattern began to form. The same shady behavior that her mother had seen years ago still happening, but it wasn't easy. Marcus noticed something. One afternoon, he cornered her in the hallway. "You've been asking too many questions." "Emma." She looked up at him. "I'm just trying to learn." His eyes narrowed. "There are some things you don't need to learn." And then he walked away. Emma's heart pounded. She knew now he was hiding something, but he was starting to see her as a threat. A few days later, things took a turn. She was called into a surprise review meeting with Marcus and 2 HR officials. They accused her of sending unauthorized emails and accessing restricted files. Emma was stunned. "I never sent anything like that," she said. But they showed her screenshots, emails she had never written. Sent from her account, it was a setup. They were trying to frame her. Emma left the room feeling like the walls were closing in. This was more serious than she thought. Marcus wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. He was fighting back. That night, she went straight to Blake's office. "They're trying to get me fired," she said. He listened quietly, then nodded. "He knows you're close. Then what do we do now?" she asked. He stood up and walked to the window. "We take away his power, but not through shouting, through proof. Clean, simple, undeniable proof." The plan changed. Emma began working with Blake's private legal team. They opened up old financial records. They pulled security logs. Blake gave her access to confidential files only under strict watch. And then, one day, Emma found it. A fake company name. Payments sent to a vendor that didn't exist. Repeated transfers over several years. The vendor was registered under a dummy account connected to an address that belonged to Marcus Gray's cousin. It was fraud. Millions had been stolen. Emma ran to Blake's office. "This is it," she said, placing the printed evidence on his desk. He read it. His face turned hard. "It's over," he said. That evening, a surprise board meeting was called. Marcus showed up, confused. When he entered the room, he saw Emma sitting beside Blake. "What's this?" he asked. Blake stood. "This is the end of your game." The board members were handed files, documents, emails, legal notes, everything Emma had found. Marcus tried to speak. "This is nonsense. She's just a kid. She doesn't understand how corporate she understands." "More than you ever did," Blake cut in. "And she has something you never had, Negriti." The board listened in silence as the proof was read out. After an hour, Marcus knew he was finished. He stood up. "You think this will stick? I built this company, you built lies." Emma said calmly, "My mother tried to stop you. You ruined her life, not mine." Blake nodded to the security team waiting outside. "Escort Mr. Gray out." As Marcus was led out of the room, Blake turned to the board. "This company almost lost its soul once. Not again. We rebuild with honesty." Later that night, Blake and Emma sat in his office. The lights dim. "You did something big, Emma," he said. She shook her head. "I just did what my mother would have done." Blake smiled. She would have been proud. The next day, Blake stood in front of the company and announced the removal of Marcus Gray due to fraud.
Ow.
He didn't name Emma, but inside the company, everyone knew. Some employees looked at her with new respect. Others avoided her. Few whispered things like CEO's favorite or troublemaker. Emma ignored them. She hadn't come for applause. She came for the truth. That weekend, she visited her father on the farm. They sat on the porch, drinking tea as the sun set behind the hills. "I'm proud of you, Em," her father said softly. "I did it for Mom," she replied. "For you." They sat in silence for a while. Then her father smiled. "You may live in a city now, but you're still my farm girl, just smarter." Emma laughed, the wind carrying her voice across the fields. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more people who doubted her, more walls to climb. But she also knew one thing for sure. No matter how big the building, no matter how powerful the men inside it, truth, courage, and a quiet mind could still shake the world. And that's exactly what she planned to keep doing. The office building that once felt cold and distant now felt different to Emma. After everything that had happened exposing Marcus Gray, standing by her mother's truth, and helping clean the company's name, Emma had become more than just an employee. She had become a quiet leader, someone people looked to, someone who reminded everyone what real strength looked like. But with new respect came new responsibility. Emma didn't want to become the kind of leader who sat in a big office and gave orders. She wanted to change how things worked from the inside out. After Marcus was fired, Blake Rutherford called her into his office again. This time, his expression wasn't just serious. It was thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot, Emma," he said, tapping his fingers on the desk. "About leadership, about this company's future." "About what?" "I want Stratix to stand for." Emma nodded, curious about what was coming. He continued, "We've built a powerful company, yes. But somewhere along the way, we forgot the people who built it. We ignored the ones who came from nothing, like you, like your mother." Emma stayed quiet. She didn't want praise. She wanted purpose. That's why he said slowly, "I want you to lead something new. A division we've never had before. One focused on innovation, fairness, and mentorship. You'll be in charge of bringing in talent from unexpected places, small towns, underfunded schools, overlooked communities. I want you to find people like you, people no one believed in, but who are full of potential." Emma blinked. "You want me to run a whole department?" "Yes," Blake replied. "We'll give it a name later. But for now, it's yours. Build it from scratch. I'll give you a budget, a team, and full independence." Emma felt a wave of emotion. It wasn't about power. It was about the chance to help others, people like her, break through walls. "Built by people like Marcus, I accept," she said quietly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Emma worked day and night to build what would become known as the New Roots Division or Department, focused on hiring hidden talent, training them, and giving them real opportunities to grow within Stratix. She traveled to schools, community centers, small towns. She gave talks. She looked at resumes that had never been seen by any major company. She hired young people who didn't have degrees, but had fire. Single mothers who had taught themselves, coding at night. Veterans, teenagers who had built websites for fun, at first. The rest of the company didn't know what to make of it. Some called it a charity project. Some doubted her choices. Others even mocked the idea, but Emma kept going. She trained her hires personally, taught them the way her father had taught her, patiently, honestly, with hands-on lessons. Didn't care if someone wore old shoes or spoke with a heavy accent. If they had brains and heart, she wanted them. Within 3 months, something unexpected happened. One of her new hires, a shy girl named Noor, from a low-income neighborhood, spotted a flaw in Stratix's security software that the entire IT department had missed. It saved the company nearly $2 million in potential data loss. After that, people started paying attention. Another young man, Avir, who had once worked as a cashier, came up with a new logistics model that improved delivery times by 22%. He had never been to college, but he was brilliant. Emma's team started winning awards inside. Outside the company, Blake invited her to speak at a global conference, where CEOs from around the world gathered to share ideas. Emma stood on a bright stage wearing a simple blue dress, her voice calm and clear. "I'm not here to impress you with charts," she began. "I'm here to remind you that talent is not found only in boardrooms. Sometimes it's behind a barn. Sometimes it's a girl with calluses on her hands and dreams in her heart. All they need is a chance." The audience stood up and clapped for a long time. Back at Stratix, things were changing too. Inspired by Emma's work, other departments began reviewing their hiring practices. Internships opened for kids who didn't have connections. More women were placed in leadership roles. Mental health days were added to employee benefits. The company culture, which had once been cold and ruthless, began to feel more human, more open, more real. One day, Priya walked into Emma's office now, a space filled with books, plant pots, and hand-drawn thank you notes from her team. Someone's. "Here to see you," Priya said with a smile. Emma looked up. "Who?" "Your father." Emma rushed to the lobby, and there he was, Mr. Howard, wearing his best flannel shirt and holding a small box. "I brought you something," he said, eyes twinkling. Inside the box was her mother's old work badge. From when she had interned at Stratix, years ago, her father had kept it all this time. "She started this journey," he said. "It's finished it." Emma hugged him tightly, feeling the past and present come together. As they sat in the cafeteria drinking coffee, employees came up to greet Emma, some shaking her father's hand, others telling her how much she had inspired them. Her father watched it all in quiet amazement. "You've built more than a career, Emma," he said softly. "You've built a legacy." But Emma didn't let the praise get to her head. She remembered the lonely nights on the farm, the people who had laughed at her resume, the moment she had stood before Blake with nothing but courage and a paper resume in her hand. She remembered her mother, whose voice had once been silenced, how that silence had pushed her to speak louder, clearer, and truer than anyone expected. Blake later made a formal announcement. "Emma Howard is being promoted to Vice President of Innovation and Talent Growth. It's the youngest VP in company history." But titles didn't mean much to Emma. What meant more was seeing her team thrive. Seeing someone who had never been believed in finally believe in themselves. Years later, Stratix was ranked as one of the most people-friendly tech companies in the world. Its success wasn't just measured in profits, but in lives changed, walls broken, and stories rewritten. And whenever someone new joined the company, nervous, unsure, feeling out of place, they would hear the story of a girl who came from a farm, wore simple clothes, and walked into an office full of suits with nothing but honesty, strength. In her mother's memory, they would hear how she faced a CEO and didn't flinch, how she challenged a corrupt man and won, how she didn't try to fit in, but made the company fit around truth. They would hear the name Emma Howard, and they'd believe that maybe, just maybe, they could do something big too. Because in the end, it wasn't about where you came from. It was about what you stood for. And Emma stood for courage. She stood for justice. She stood for every person who had been ignored, overlooked, or silenced. And the world. The world had no choice but to listen.